Hey everyone, I'm your author June. Before we get started, I really would appreciate it if everyone could hit the subscribe button. It helps me grow the channel, and I would love for all of you to come on this journey with me, as a family. Now, let's get into the story. Let me know if you enjoy. The sun blazed, Jedediah shielding his brow with a calloused hand. Heat shimmered off the cracked earth, where dust devils pirouetted a chaotic dance echoing the butterflies erupting in his gut. Abandoning his neglected Sunday chore, the porch scrub felt excusable today. Today, Clara arrived. A nervous energy, unfamiliar since childhood waits for his father's return from long drives, possessed him. He scanned the horizon, a molten distortion where the hills faded into the sky. Any minute now, the stage would appear. He smoothed his best shirt, the homespun fabric a stark contrast to his usual work clothes. Dressing up felt like play acting. He was a creature of soil and toil, not stiff collars and polite niceties. But for Clara, he'd make the attempt. Inside, the scent of aged wood and dust provided little comfort. The single room served triple duty: a combined kitchen, dining area, and parlor. A small sleeping space was tucked away behind a partition. He'd ensured its tidiness, the bed adorned with a new quilt from his mother's autumn package. On the windowsill, a handful of wildflowers drooped, a testament to redemption's brutal climate. Pausing before the aged, web-cracked mirror, he ran a hand through his unruly hair, wincing. Time and hardship had etched lines onto his face. Handsome, he wasn't. He questioned his sanity in sending for a mail-order bride. Loneliness, that deep, bone-chilling ache since his pa's passing, was the culprit. The ranch reverberated with silence, the absence of a familiar voice. He yearned for a companion to witness the sunsets, a confidant beyond the lowing cattle. He imagined the town gossips, their whispers painting him as desperate. Perhaps they were right. Yet, Clara's advertisement, a faded square on the mercantile's bulletin board, had offered a spark. Seeking a new beginning, a compassionate spirit, a tranquil existence. Tranquility might be a stretch in redemption, but he believed he possessed the necessary kindness. He retrieved the worn photograph from his pocket, its edges softened with handling. Clara Whitmore. Even in the formal pose, an inner radiance shone. Her eyes, dark and knowing, held a trace of melancholy, a vulnerability that resonated within him. Her hair, pulled back, showcased delicate features and a resolute jawline. He knew this image intimately, every nuance etched in his memory. He traced the curve of her cheek with a hardened fingertip, imagining its texture. He knew so little of her, just fragments shared in her letters. A life back east, Philadelphia mentioned. Family lost. A yearning for a fresh start. He hesitated to pry, afraid of shattering the fragile connection. Instead, he described the ranch, the labor, the simple joys. He'd offered a haven, a sanctuary. A distant rumble jolted him from his thoughts. He burst onto the porch, his pulse quickening. The stage. It was on its way. A plume of dust billowed, swelling with each passing second. Panic surged, a primal urge to flee, to vanish. What if he disappointed her? What if she regretted her decision? What if he inhaled deeply, grounding himself? He had made a vow. He had given his word. And Jedediah Stone honored his commitments. The stagecoach rattled closer, the horses straining against their tack. The driver's shouts, the whip's sharp crack, echoed in the stillness. The photograph crumpled in his fist. He needed to project strength. He needed to be welcoming. He needed to embody the man she envisioned. The stage lurched to a halt before the house, horses panting. The driver, a barrel-chested man with a waxed mustache, hopped down to unload. Jedediah stood transfixed, his gaze locked on the stagecoach door. It creaked open. A woman emerged, her face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, her eyes taking in the surroundings. Smaller than he had pictured, more fragile. A simple, road-worn dress cloaked her frame. She paused, then raised her head, her gaze meeting his. It was her, Clara. Recognition sparked, an uncanny sense of familiarity. He knew those eyes. He'd studied them for countless hours. But the photograph had failed to capture their rich hue, their depth. The color of bittersweet chocolate, flecked with amber, and filled with a mixture of trepidation and hope. He swallowed, his mouth suddenly parched. He forced a smile, a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He stepped forward, extending a hand. "Clara," he said, his voice raspy but sincere. "Welcome to redemption." She hesitated, then accepted his hand. Her fingers were slender, her grip surprisingly firm. A current passed between them, unexpected and potent. "Jedediah," she replied, her voice gentle and melodious. "Thank you." He held her gaze, lost in the well of her eyes. He saw the weariness, the sorrow, but he also detected something else. Resilience, fortitude. A woman who had weathered storms and still dared to believe in love. He squeezed her hand, a silent pledge. "I'll care for you, Clara," he vowed. "I promise." He prayed he could fulfill that promise. He hoped to shield her from the shadows she carried. He hoped to offer the peace she craved. But as their eyes locked, he understood their journey had just begun, and he sensed it would be arduous. He only hoped he possessed the strength to navigate it alongside her. The driver cleared his throat, shattering the moment. "Anything else, ma'am?" he inquired, gesturing towards the luggage. Clara released Jedediah's hand, a subtle blush coloring her cheeks. "Just the trunk, please." Jedediah lifted the heavy trunk, surprised by its weight. He wondered what it contained. Secrets, perhaps? He set it down on the porch with a grunt. The driver touched the brim of his hat to Clara and Jedediah. "Best of luck to you both," he said, then returned to the stage, cracking the whip. The horses surged ahead, the stagecoach disappearing into the distance, leaving them in the echoing quiet. Jedediah faced Clara, his heart hammering. He couldn't predict the future, but he knew one truth. He would fight for her. He would gamble everything for her. Because in that instant, their eyes meeting across the dusty yard, he hadn't just married a stranger. He had found the woman he was destined to cherish. A stranger arrives, the stagecoach shuddered to a stop, spewing grit and dust as its brakes shrieked their displeasure. Despite the arid heat, Jedediah's palms were slick as he watched the coach door creak open. First came a battered valise, landing with a muffled thud, then the gleam of a black polished boot. Finally she appeared. Clara Whitmore. Jedediah's heart skipped a beat. The tintype hadn't prepared him for the delicate architecture of her face, the way the waning sun gilded her skin with an almost otherworldly luminescence. A bonnet of deep indigo shadowed most of her face. Yet even veiled, her presence hummed with quiet resolve, a subtle loveliness that seemed at odds with whatever brought her to this forsaken place. She paused, her hand still clinging to the frame. Her gaze swept the parched street, taking in the meager buildings of redemption, the cluster of onlookers, and eventually him. Jedediah drew himself up straighter, forcing a smile that felt stiff against his face. "Miss Whitmore?" The words rasped from his throat, less refined than he wished. Clara inclined her head, a movement almost mechanical. "Mr. Stone," she replied, her voice a low, breathy melody scarcely audible over the gathering dusk chorus of insects. She descended, her slight form draped in a lavender traveling cloak, its color bleached by the sun. He moved to relieve her of the bag. "Welcome to redemption." She yielded the valise without a word, her gloved hand briefly touching his. A current, sharp and unexpected, coursed through him. Her skin was surprisingly cool to the touch. He quickly took the valise, its weight a surprise. "Thank you," she murmured, her gaze fixed on some distant point. The silence hung heavy between them. Jedediah hadn't anticipated such profound reticence. He'd envisioned conversation, laughter, perhaps even a shared supper. Instead, he encountered a wall of guarded composure. I have the wagon ready," he stammered, indicating his sun-faded buckboard hitched nearby. "It's not much, but it'll get us to the ranch." Clara pivoted, her veiled eyes surveying the desolate expanse. The sinking sun painted the landscape in long, dramatic strokes, transforming the familiar into the surreal. He saw her swallow, a faint tremor ripple through her frame. "It's immense," she said, her voice a bare thread of sound. Andy silent. "It is," Jedediah conceded, at a loss for further words. He longed to reassure her, to tell her she was safe now, that he would watch over her. But the words remained trapped, strangled by his own sense of inadequacy. He hefted her valise, the aged leather smooth under his fingers. "The ranch is a stretch. Shall we head out?" She trailed after him to the wagon, her steps measured, almost cautious. Jedediah assisted her onto the seat, his hands momentarily spanning her waist. He felt the fragile structure beneath her cloak, a suggestion of hidden strength. He withdrew them quickly, heat rising in his face. As he joined her on the wagon bench, he saw her gaze fixed on the far-off horizon. A deep crease etched itself between her brows, barely noticeable in the dimming light. She seemed to be searching, or perhaps expecting something. "Everything all right, Miss Whitmore?" he asked, his concern coloring his tone. Clara started, her eyes widening just a fraction. "Please, call me Clara," she offered, a brief, fleeting smile gracing her lips. "And yes, everything is fine. Just taking it all in." Jedediah clucked to the horses, urging them forward. The wagon wheels ground against the gravel path, the sound magnified in the stillness. He glanced at Clara, her profile still obscured by the bonnet. He wondered what thoughts were swirling within her, what secrets hid behind those shadowed eyes. They rode in silence, punctuated only by the creaks of the wagon and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves. Jedediah cast covert glances at Clara, attempting to decipher her mood. She appeared taut, her shoulders rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Are you weary?" he asked, finally breaking the quiet. "It must have been a long journey." "A little," Clara admitted, her voice almost inaudible. "But I'm resilient." He yearned to know what she meant by that, to unravel the implicit narratives that seemed to cling to her. But he hesitated, questioning his right to pry. He was, in essence, a stranger, and she, undoubtedly, was an enigma. As they ventured further from town, the terrain became increasingly stark, the hush all the more complete. The sparse signs of life were limited to the occasional jackrabbit darting across their path, and the distant cry of a coyote. Jedediah felt a prickle of unease. He had brought her here, to this isolated expanse, and remained uncertain about the predicament he had entered. He observed Clara, her features illuminated by the spectral moonlight. She seemed more delicate, more defenseless than before. The weight of his commitment settled heavily upon him, not just to provide a sanctuary, but also to act as her protector. He felt unsure if he had the fortitude to fulfill that role. Abruptly, Clara gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. She stared intently at something in the distance, her eyes wide with apprehension. "What is it?" Jedediah asked, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle stowed beneath the seat. Clara offered no verbal response. She simply extended a trembling finger, pointing. Jedediah followed her line of sight, his heart hammering in his chest. In the distance, silhouetted against the moon-washed sky, he discerned two figures mounted on horseback. They were far off, yet their shapes were unmistakable. They were approaching, and with haste. Jedediah's blood chilled. He had no knowledge of their identities or their motives, but he felt with an undeniable certainty that they were not allies, and he knew that Clara was aware of this too. The price of silence just went up. He tightened his grip on the reins, urging the horses to greater speed. He risked a glance at Clara, her face ashen. Her eyes reflected raw fear. Yet beneath that fear, he glimpsed something else. A flicker of resolve. A glimmer of defiance. "Hold on," he commanded, his voice tight. "It's going to be a bumpy ride." Ranch life and restless nights, the first rooster's screech yanked Clara from a fitful doze, her gaze drawn to the rough-hewn ceiling beams of the ranch house. Sleep was a skittish thing, perpetually banished by phantoms pirouetting behind her closed lids. Each groan of the timbers, each whisper of breeze through the cottonwoods sounded like encroaching footsteps. A disquieting murmur carried on the prairie wind. She rose, the unfamiliar drape of the cotton nightdress a constant reminder she was no longer fleeing, but dwelling in another's reality. Downstairs, the kitchen was frigid, illuminated weakly by the dawn filtering through the window pane. Jedediah wasn't stirring, though a pot of coffee sat poised on the stove, a wordless gesture of welcome. Clara, however, possessed zero skill in coaxing flame from the slumbering stove. She regarded the kindling, then the hefty logs, a wave of helplessness cresting within her. Her talents lay in embroidery and elocution, not wilderness acumen. Instead, she decided to tackle breakfast. The pantry offered flour, eggs, and a thick cut of bacon. Pancakes seemed foolproof. Quickly, though, smoke choked the air as bacon fat popped with fury and the initial pancake blackened into an unrecognizable blob. She coughed, flapping a tea towel at the haze, her cheeks burning with mortification. Jedediah appeared in the doorway, drawn by the acrid aroma. He leaned against the frame, a droll smile gracing his features. "Mornin', Clara. Everything under control? Smells like you're trying to signal the next county over." Clara started, flustered. I was attempting breakfast," she stammered, indicating the carbonized remains. "My efforts appear less than successful." Jedediah chuckled, a sound like warm honey. "Well, culinary expertise comes with practice. Here, let me take over." He assumed command of the stove, his movements economical and sure. He swiftly assessed the situation, dispatching the ruined pancake to the pig slop and adjusting the stove's damper. Bacon first, gentle heat. Then, less batter for the flapjacks, and keep a keen eye. Clara watched him, mesmerized, as he transformed the chaotic tableau into a symphony of sizzling pork and bronzed circles. "Thank you," she murmured. "I feel quite inept." "Nonsense," Jedediah countered, flipping a pancake with a deft flick of the wrist. "Everyone has their own gifts. Yours might not be in the culinary arts, yet." He grinned, offering her a plate piled high with pancakes and bacon. Dig in. It's a long day ahead. The hours stretched before her, laden with unfamiliar tasks. Jedediah, endlessly patient, showed her how to gather eggs from the henhouse, how to cultivate the modest kitchen garden, and even how to milk a cow, an endeavor that left her both amused and vaguely appalled. Her city-bred hands were clumsy and unaccustomed to such labor, but she pressed on, spurred by a need to demonstrate her worth, to secure her place in this new existence. As the sun kissed the horizon, bathing the land in strokes of apricot and violet, Clara felt a profound fatigue settle into her bones. She sat on the porch, observing Jedediah tending the horses, her body aching in previously unknown locales. "Weary?" Jedediah queried, approaching her. He settled beside her on the swing, the wooden slats protesting softly. "Utterly," Clara confessed, sinking against the railing. "I've never toiled so hard in my life." "It takes some acclimatizing," Jedediah said, his gaze directed toward the distant peaks. "But you'll grow stronger. You're more resilient than you realize." They sat in companionable silence, broken only by the trilling of crickets and the distant cry of a coyote. Clara shivered, despite the lingering warmth. "Chilly?" Jedediah inquired, concern briefly marring his features. "No," Clara demurred swiftly. "Just uneasy." Jedediah studied her face, his eyes filled with quiet perceptiveness. He knew it wasn't mere unease. She was haunted. He saw it mirrored in the shadows clinging to her eyes, in the subtle start she gave at unexpected sounds. "Is there something you wish to discuss, Clara?" he asked gently. "Something you'd like to share?" Clara faltered, her fingers knotting nervously in her lap. "It's intricate," she admitted at last, her voice barely audible. "And not easily explained. I'm not pressing for explanations," Jedediah reassured, his tone soothing. "Only if you need a listening ear, I am here." Clara regarded him, her eyes combing his face for any hint of judgment or disbelief, finding only compassion and genuineness. But the words remained locked within. The secrets she held were too weighty, too perilous to release. "Thank you, Jedediah," she managed finally, forcing a weak smile. "I appreciate that, but for now I just need some time." Jedediah nodded, respecting her need for privacy. He understood he couldn't coerce her confidence, but he also resolved to remain steadfast in his support. He would be patient, offering his strength, and present when she found the courage to confide in him. As days blurred into weeks, a rhythm developed on the ranch. Clara adapted to the physical demands, her hands toughening yet gaining strength. She learned to anticipate Jedediah's needs, assisting with the tasks without prompting. A quiet understanding bloomed between them, a tacit connection that transcended the spoken word. Yet, the nights remained a trial. Clara continued to struggle with sleep, tormented by nightmares and haunted by the dread of her past catching up. Often, she sought solace outside, finding refuge in the immensity of the prairie, the star-strewn canopy, a silent witness to her inner turmoil. One evening, Jedediah discovered her on the porch swing, her gaze fixed on the dim horizon. He sat alongside her, offering his quiet company. "I can't sleep," Clara stated finally, her voice raw. "I know," Jedediah replied softly. "I've seen you out here." Clara sighed, raking a hand through her tangled tresses. "It's always the same," she explained. "The same faces, the same echoes, the same dread." Jedediah reached for her hand, his touch providing warmth and comfort. "You're safe here, Clara," he affirmed. "I won't allow anyone to harm you." Clara looked into his eyes, a swirl of gratitude and uncertainty in her gaze. "How can you be so certain?" she asked. "You barely know me." "Perhaps not," Jedediah said, gently squeezing her hand. "But I trust what I see. And I see a woman who's weathered unimaginable storms, a woman deserving of a chance at peace. And I'll pour every effort into ensuring she finds it." His words, imbued with sincerity and conviction, struck a chord deep within Clara's heart. For the first time since arriving in Redemption, a spark of hope ignited. A fragile belief that perhaps, just perhaps, she could forge a new life, a fresh beginning, with this gentle and honorable man. But the shadow of her old fears still loomed, a constant reminder that her past was never truly gone. Whispers in town, the morning sun, a blast furnace compared to Harmony Gulch's usual gentle warmth, made Sheriff Bart Collins grimace as he plastered the wanted notice to the general store's bulletin board. Each hammer blow reverberated in the stillness, a stark percussion announcing discord. Sweat beaded on Bart's brow beneath his hat, his ample frame a testament to saloon life. One last appraising look, a glint of something unsettling sparking in his gaze, then he lumbered toward the swinging doors. The poster. A stark announcement on cheap paper. A shadowy likeness stared from the top, a woman framed by dark hair, her eyes like chips of obsidian. Below, block letters declared, "Wanted for questioning. Clara Whitmore, accomplice to robbery and assault." A telling scar above her left wrist was noted, a detail that stirred uneasy recognition. Soon, murmurs arose, a low hum of conjecture. A clutch of townsfolk huddled, heads cocked, voices hushed as if sharing secrets. Pointed fingers danced, glances flickered, and the air vibrated with speculation. Mrs. Higgins, her breadbasket digging into her forearm, pursed her lips in disapproval. Old Man Hemlock, claiming a lifetime of witnessed events, narrowed his eyes, grumbling about vanished, simpler times. Clara Whitmore, someone breathed, the name laced with censure. Jedediah's wife. The effect was immediate. Jedediah, respected for his quiet resolve and unimpeachable honesty, now found himself caught in the net of suspicion. His marriage, once viewed as compassion, now sparked distrust. Doubts, like stubborn thorns, began to bloom in the fertile ground of gossip. Across the street, Martha Abernathy, proprietor of the Harmony Gulch Gazette, watched with furrowed brow. A woman of keen intellect and a strong moral compass, she'd witnessed enough hardship in Harmony Gulch to trust her instincts. The whispers chafed. The town's swift condemnation of a newcomer, and by extension, Jedediah, felt unjust. She observed Sheriff Collins emerge from the saloon, a self-satisfied smirk plastered on his face. He surveyed the gathering, his gaze lingering on the poster as if absorbing their attention. Martha's stare hardened. She'd always mistrusted Collins, a man whose hunger for power eclipsed his sense of right. His sudden interest in Clara Whitmore seemed contrived. The crowd thickened. A few bolder souls edged closer, fingers tracing Clara's likeness. The scar was referenced repeatedly, confirming their suspicions. Jedediah's kindness was now deemed naivete, his protectiveness complicity. Martha crossed the dusty street, her pace deliberate. She halted at the periphery, instantly silencing the nearest voices. She didn't speak, letting her gaze sweep over the faces, a silent challenge to their premature judgments. "Sheriff," she stated, her voice ringing clear, slicing through the stifling atmosphere. "Perhaps clarify the basis of this accusation." Collins visibly tensed, clearly unprepared for Martha's directness. He cleared his throat, seeking composure. Standard procedure, Martha. Blackwood Gulch authorities requested the posting. They believe the woman has information concerning a recent robbery. Information, Martha echoed, her tone edged with skepticism. Or is she a person of interest? They wish to question her. Collins evaded, avoiding her unwavering gaze. Cooperation is advised. And should she decline? Martha pressed, her eyes unwavering. Collins shrugged, a gesture weighted with unspoken implications. Then apprehension becomes necessary. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The prospect of Jedediah's wife, a virtual stranger, being arrested within their town ignited a fresh wave of unease. Whispers erupted anew, louder this time, fueled by fear and conjecture. Martha turned to the poster, studying Clara's face. She detected a vulnerability in those dark eyes, the hint of underlying anguish that belied criminality. She perceived a woman in flight, potentially from circumstances rather than culpability. "Has Jedediah been informed?" she inquired, addressing the crowd. Silence. No one dared meet her gaze, lost as they were in conjecture, quick to denounce. Martha shook her head, a blend of disappointment and resolve etching her features. "This is disgraceful," she proclaimed, her voice resonating with conviction. "We rush to judgment, embracing the worst assumptions. Jedediah is among the most honorable individuals I know. He merits our support, not our mistrust." She turned and walked away, leaving the crowd to contend with her words. The murmurs persisted, but now tinged with hesitation, a sliver of doubt amidst the condemnation. Martha's words had taken root, a seed of reason and empathy threatening the comfortable narrative of suspicion. Collins watched her retreat, eyes narrowed. He recognized Martha Abernathy as a force. Her sway over Harmony Gulch was considerable, and her unwavering justice could prove a significant impediment to his agenda. Caution was required. As the day unfolded, the wanted poster remained a focal point, a persistent reminder of the cloud of suspicion looming over Harmony Gulch. The murmurs persisted, snaking through the town like poisonous ivy, threatening the community's fragile bonds. That afternoon, the stagecoach arrived, bearing not only supplies, but also additional copies of the poster, ensuring that every corner of Harmony Gulch was touched by the accusation against Clara Whitmore. The atmosphere crackled with tension, like a storm about to unleash its fury. The only question remaining: who would be caught in the deluge? The truth revealed the wind keened a mournful dirge around the ranch house eaves, mirroring the tempest brewing inside Jedediah. Framed in the doorway, the lamplight painted elongated, shifting patterns across his weathered face as he gripped the damning handbill. He watched Clara, a soft melody on her lips, tending her fledgling herb garden just beyond the kitchen window, a vibrant patch of jade against the dun-colored plains. A glacial knot tightened in his stomach, a sensation not felt since losing his father. Boots crunching on the stone-strewn path, he approached. Clara turned, her face momentarily radiant with a smile that lacked genuine warmth. "Jedediah! Home already?" Her hand rose, then faltered, returning to her side. The space between them yawned, impossibly wide. He extended the poster, its stark monochrome rendering of Clara's features a brutal parody of the woman standing before him. The smile evaporated, replaced by a raw terror that struck Jedediah like a physical blow. "Clara," he managed, his voice a raspy thread. Her silence was her answer, eyes glued to the poster, breath hitching in ragged gasps. Color fled her cheeks, leaving a pallid mask. She swayed, and Jedediah instinctively reached to support her, but she recoiled as if scorched. "Tell me," he pressed, his tone hardening, a betrayal of the anguish threatening to drown him. What's the truth? She stumbled backward, tears brimming, and shook her head mutely. I can't explain. Can't, or won't untangle the tale. Jedediah's voice, sharp as a shard of glass, conveyed a disappointment that went bone deep. He recalled their whispered intimacies, their shared aspirations, the edifice of their life together. Had it all been built on quicksand? She sank onto a nearby bench, her frame convulsing with suppressed sobs. It's a twisted history, Jedediah, cloaked in darkness. Kneeling, he forced her to meet his gaze. He needed to discern reality in her eyes, needed to know if the woman he loved was capable of such elaborate fabrication. I'm owed this explanation, he urged, his tone softening, an entreaty. We both are. The dam finally ruptured, and a deluge of whispered admissions and choked sobs poured forth. She spoke of Silas Blackwood, a man of exorbitant wealth and fearsome influence, a puppeteer who had controlled her existence, her every breath. She recounted his merciless dealings, his insatiable ambition, and the ever-present specter of his violence. He exploited me. She wept, burying her face in her hands. He coerced me into actions I can barely name. Jedediah's heart constricted with each syllable. He pictured Clara ensnared, defenseless, in the clutches of this monster. A boiling rage surged through him, directed at Silas Blackwood, a man still a stranger, but already his sworn enemy. She revealed how she had witnessed Silas commit a ghastly act, a crime that sealed her fate. Knowing he would never willingly release her, she had carefully orchestrated her escape, hoarding every spare cent, every fragment of information that might aid her vanishing act. The mail-order bride scheme had been her last resort, a desperate roll of the dice for a fresh start, a chance to outrun the encroaching shadows. The staged robbery, the assault. Jedediah probed, his voice tight. Silas designed it all, Clara gasped. He cast me as the villain. He wants me returned, Jedediah. Or permanently silenced. A profound hush fell between them, punctuated only by the lonesome cry of the wind. Jedediah turned away, his back to Clara, his thoughts in turmoil. He envisioned Sheriff Collins, with his unwavering adherence to the law and respect for order. He considered the townspeople, their simmering fears and suspicions. And then he pictured Clara, the woman he had vowed to cherish, the woman who had reignited the embers of joy in his desolate world. He faced her again, his expression etched with resolve. "Why the silence?" he demanded, his tone low, frayed at the edges. Clara lifted her gaze, red-rimmed and pleading for absolution. "I lived in fear," she whispered. "Fear that you'd never believe me. Fear of Silas's reach. I craved safety, Jedediah. I longed for a chance at happiness." Jedediah knelt once more, enfolding her hands in his. Her skin was like ice, trembling uncontrollably. He squeezed them gently, trying to convey the depth of his inner conflict, the war raging within. "I'm at a loss, Clara," he confessed, a hint of despair in his voice. "I'm divided. I want to believe you, but the constraints of the law. The law did not shield me then," Clara countered, a nascent steely glint in her eyes. "The law will not safeguard me now." Her words hung suspended, a direct challenge to Jedediah's most deeply held convictions. He searched her eyes, saw the lingering terror, but also an unyielding determination. At that moment, he knew he could not abandon her, not now, not ever. He rose, drawing Clara up with him. He enfolded her in his arms, holding her close, sensing the frailty of her form against his. He closed his eyes, blocking out the uncertainties, the terrors, the murmurs of the town. "We will unearth a solution," he said, his voice steady, firm. "We will establish your innocence. We will confront this as one." He pulled away, searching her eyes. "But you must confide in me, Clara. Unreservedly. No more omissions." Clara nodded, tears cascading down her cheeks. "I trust you, Jedediah," she breathed. "With everything that I am." He understood that trusting her was a risk of the highest order, a gamble that could cost him dearly. But as he peered into her eyes, he discerned a mirror of his own hope, his own yearning for a second chance. At that pivotal instant, he knew that he was prepared to flout every rule, defy every statute, to safeguard the woman he loved. The inner storm hadn't dissipated, but its character had shifted, the bewilderment supplanted by a cold-blooded determination. He would shield Clara, even if it necessitated facing Silas Blackwood in person. He had taken a stranger as his wife, but he would defend her as if they shared blood. Shadows in the valley dust devils spun across the parched horizon, their frenetic dance a stark counterpoint to the dread-gripping Harmony Gulch. Inside the barn, Jedediah wrestled with a broken harness, the familiar scents of hay and saddle leather offering scant comfort to his raw nerves. Each movement of his calloused hands, usually so deft, felt clumsy, mirroring the chaos churning within. His gaze flickered repeatedly toward the house, picturing Clara, no doubt at the window, her apprehension mirroring his own. The secret gnawed at him the wanted poster, Silas Blackwood, Clara's veiled past. It was a burden that threatened to buckle his resolve. The townsfolk's whispers about the newcomer, her sudden arrival, her reserved nature, already grated. This reveal would be a conflagration. The cadence of approaching hooves shattered his concentration. He stepped into the sun-baked yard, shading his eyes. 2 riders entered the settlement, their presence a jarring intrusion on the languid afternoon. Strangers, undeniably. Their clothes were too pristine, their hats pulled down too low, their eyes holding a flinty hardness. They carried themselves with a predator's grace, a coiled energy hinting at suppressed violence. Jedediah watched as they dismounted before the saloon, the hitching post creaking in protest. Hired guns, men who dealt in lead and settled scores. In the general store, Clara procured Staples flour and sugar, necessities she'd learned to secure herself, sparing Jedediah the infrequent trips. The air, normally redolent with spices and dried fruit, felt suddenly oppressive. After paying Mrs. Henderson, she forced a smile, her focus drawn back to the window. 2 unfamiliar figures stood near the saloon. Something about their stance, the way they surveyed the street, triggered a primal fear, like wolves scenting prey. Though she couldn't discern their features, she sensed their scrutiny, cold and calculating. Silas. Had he finally caught up? She gripped the flour sack, her knuckles bone white. Air caught in her throat. She had to reach the ranch, forewarn Jedediah. Inside the saloon, the pair, answering only to Cole and Hawk, made their presence known. Cole, the taller, lounged against the bar, appraising the bartender's glass-polishing efforts with narrowed eyes. Hawk, shorter and thick-set, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, sat at a table, his hand hovering near the Colt strapped to his leg. "New faces," observed Gus, the bartender, his tone carefully devoid of inflection. Cole's lips peeled back in a wolfish grin. "Just passing through. Heard this was a sleepy sort of place. good for a drink and some information. Information. A nervous tick flickered in Gus's eye. About what, exactly? Hawk's voice, low and raspy, rumbled across the room. About a fresh bride, and the rancher who took her in. Gus stiffened, his grip tightening on the glass. He swallowed hard. I haven't the faintest. Cole pushed off the bar, a sinuous threat in his movement. He closed the distance to Gus, his voice a sibilant whisper. Don't insult my intelligence, old man. We know she's here. Clara Whitmore, a real looker, and the rancher, Jedediah Stone, right? Slab-shouldered fella, owns the Double Bar S. The color drained from Gus's face. He knew better than to lie outright. They keep to themselves, he mumbled. Don't stir up trouble. Trouble has a way of finding folks, Hawk drawled, his eyes gleaming like chips of obsidian. Especially those burying secrets. He tossed a silver cartwheel onto the scarred tabletop. Tell us how to find their spread. Jedediah watched Clara emerge from the general store, her face ashen. She spotted him, and her pace quickened. He sensed the urgency. He strode towards her, his long legs eating up the distance. He followed her gaze toward the saloon, saw the dawning terror in her eyes. Then he saw them. The two men framed in the doorway, observing her. He broke into a sprint, a drumbeat of dread in his chest. He had to reach her side. He had to shield her. Clara darted toward Jedediah, her breath ragged and shallow. They're here, she gasped, clutching his arm. Silas sent them. I'm sure of it. Jedediah encircled her with his arm, pulling her close. He fixed the two men with a steely glare. Get inside, he commanded, his voice a low growl. I'll take care of this. No, Jedediah, Clara pleaded, panic widening her eyes. They're dangerous. We have to flee. Now. But Jedediah held his ground, his resolve unyielding. He wouldn't run. Not anymore. He had pledged to safeguard Clara, and he would honor that vow, whatever the cost. The shadows lengthened in the valley, and the air crackled with the promise of a gathering storm. Lessons in survival, the sun beat down on the dusty clearing behind the barn, baking the earth to a hard, unforgiving crust. Jedediah stood beside Clara, the Winchester rifle feeling alien in her hands. Its dark metal was warm against her skin, a stark contrast to the cool silk she'd worn back then. She pushed the thought away. All right, Jedediah said, his voice calm and steady, a reassuring anchor in the storm brewing inside her. First things first, safety. Always treat it like it's loaded, even if you know it isn't. He demonstrated how to check the chamber, his movements deliberate and precise. Clara watched him intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. The scent of gun oil and dry grass filled the air. She mimicked his actions, her fingers fumbling slightly. Jedediah gently corrected her grip. Easy now. Don't force it. Let the rifle become an extension of your arm. His hand brushed against hers, sending a jolt of unexpected warmth through her. She met his gaze, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. Now, sighting, he continued, stepping back to give her space. Find your target, align the sights, and squeeze the trigger. Don't jerk it. A smooth, steady pull. He pointed to a collection of tin cans he'd arranged on a weathered fence post. Start with those. They ain't going nowhere. Clara raised the rifle, her arms trembling slightly. The weight of it felt immense. She focused on the cans, trying to block out the fear that gnawed at her insides. Cole and Hawk. Silas. The memories swirled like dust devils, threatening to overwhelm her. "Breathe, Clara." Jedediah's voice cut through the noise in her head. "Just breathe." She inhaled deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. She lined up the sights on a rusty tomato can, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the sound echoing across the quiet landscape. The can jumped off the fence post, spinning wildly before landing in the dirt. A small smile touched Clara's lips. "I hit it," she said, surprised. "You did good," Jedediah replied, his own smile mirroring hers. "Now, do it again." They spent the next hour practicing. Clara's initial apprehension slowly gave way to a grudging confidence. Each shot was a small victory, a tangible act of defiance against the forces that threatened to consume her. Jedediah was patient and encouraging, offering gentle corrections and words of praise. He showed her how to compensate for the wind, how to adjust her stance, how to anticipate the recoil. Between shots, they talked, not about Silas, not about the danger that loomed, but about simple things: the weather, the crops, the mischievous antics of the ranch's stray cat. These mundane conversations were a balm to Clara's soul, a reminder that life, even in the face of fear, could still hold moments of peace and normalcy. Once, after she'd managed to knock down 3 cans in a row, she turned to Jedediah, her face flushed with excitement. "I think I'm actually getting the hang of this," she said, laughing. Jedediah chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Don't get cocky now. There's still plenty to learn." He winked. "But you're a natural." As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing, Jedediah called a halt to the practice. Clara lowered the rifle, her arms aching, but her spirit buoyed. "Now comes the important part," Jedediah said, picking up a soft cloth and a bottle of oil. "Taking care of your weapon." He showed her how to clean the barrel, how to lubricate the moving parts, how to protect the metal from rust. Clara watched him, fascinated by the care he took with the rifle. It wasn't just a tool to him. It was something to be respected, something to be cherished. As he worked, his fingers moved with a practiced grace, a familiarity born of years of handling firearms. He handed her the cloth and oil. "Your turn," he said. Clara took the rifle, feeling a strange sense of intimacy as she began to clean it. The scent of oil filled her nostrils, mingling with the lingering smell of gunpowder. She followed Jedediah's instructions, carefully wiping down each part, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingertips. Jedediah stood close beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. He pointed out a speck of residue she'd missed, his breath warm against her ear. "Right there," he murmured. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She paused, suddenly aware of the closeness between them. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting a soft, romantic glow over the clearing. She looked up at Jedediah, her eyes searching his. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. For a long moment they stood there, suspended in time, the only sound the gentle breeze rustling through the trees. Jedediah cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Let's get this done before it gets dark," he said, his voice slightly rough. Clara nodded, turning her attention back to the rifle. But the moment had changed something between them. The shared laughter, the growing trust, the simple act of caring for the weapon it had forged a bond, a connection that ran deeper than words. As they walked back to the house, the rifle slung over Clara's shoulder, she felt a sense of resolve settle within her. She was still afraid, but she was no longer helpless. She had Jedediah, and she had a weapon, and she was ready to fight for her life, for her freedom, and for the love she had found in this unexpected place. The lessons in survival had just begun. The darkness held no fear, only the promise of an equal fight. A fight she would wage with Jedediah by her side, their love the only ammunition they would ever truly need. The town divided. The "wanted" poster, a crude likeness of Clara plastered on cheap paper, flapped a discordant rhythm against the general store's time-worn facade, a jarring intrusion on Harmony Gulch's K. Tranquil Powhatan. The afternoon sun glinted off Sheriff Bart Collins's oily hair and polished badge as he leaned, a picture of self-importance against the porch. His chaw of tobacco punctuated the air with a brown arc. "Well now," he drawled, his voice cutting through the sleepy afternoon. "Looks like our songbirds got a few secrets, eh?" A nervous murmur trickled through the townsfolk gathered before the store. Jedediah, observing from across the dusty street, felt his gut clench. The day he dreaded had arrived. Seeing Clara branded a fugitive ignited a slow-burning rage. Inside the airless town hall, lit by flickering lanterns that painted grotesque caricatures on worried faces, the meeting crackled with tension. Collins, predictably holding court, gestured with a flourish toward the incriminating poster. "The evidence is plain," he declared, his voice echoing in the small space. "Clara Whitmore is wanted for questions about some troublesome matters back east. We have a duty to our town, to justice." From the back, Old Man Hemlock's voice, raspy with age, cut through the air. "Troublesome matters? What kind of troublesome?" "Spill it, Bart." Colin's smile was a thin, brittle thing. "That information is delicate, Jed. Let's just say it involves misplaced valuables, tall tales, and possibly worse things." A wave of disquiet washed over the room. Mrs. Gable, prone to dramatics and gossip, gasped, her hand fluttering to her chest. "Theft? Lies? But she seemed such a gentle thing." "Seemed," Collins echoed, his tone laced with poison. "Deception wears many faces, Mary. Many faces indeed." Martha Abernathy, her spectacles magnifying her keen eyes, rose, her voice surprisingly firm. "Sheriff, with due respect, this is a fog of innuendo. What specific crimes are alleged? And who exactly has made these allegations?" Collins squirmed. "The authorities in Philadelphia, Miss Abernathy. They sent a warrant, requesting her presence for questioning." "A warrant for questioning, Sheriff," Martha corrected, her gaze unwavering. "Not a guilty verdict. And it's mighty convenient this arrives mere days after Jedediah Stone brought her here. Your grudge against Jedediah has been simmering for years. Don't use this woman as kindling." A collective intake of breath filled the room. Martha had thrown down the gauntlet, exposing the festering animosity between the lawman and the rancher. Colin's complexion deepened. "That's a flagrant accusation, Martha. I take offense to that. Do you, Bart?" Martha challenged, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Because it appears you're awfully eager to condemn a woman we barely know, based on whispers from strangers 1,000 miles away. Jedediah Stone has integrity, and I trust his judgment." A chorus of voices erupted, a clash of suspicions and anxieties. "We can't risk sheltering a criminal," bellowed a miner, his face smudged with coal dust. "She's a viper in our nest." "Turn her over to the law," someone else shouted. "It's the only responsible course." Jedediah stepped forward, an imposing figure cutting through the rising hysteria. His gaze, usually warm, was now glacial, and his posture radiated steely resolve. "Clara is my wife," he declared, his voice ringing with unwavering conviction. And I will not stand by and watch you convict her on rumor alone. She is innocent of any crime committed here. But the warrant, Collins stammered, his authority faltering. The warrant requests an interview, Bart, Jedediah countered, his eyes locked on the sheriff's. It is not a sentence of death. I will ensure she receives a fair hearing, but I will not deliver her to a lynch mob fueled by gossip and fear. Are you obstructing justice, Jedediah? Collins challenged, his eyes narrowed to slits. I'm defending my wife, Jedediah replied, his voice unwavering. And I'm upholding the principles of justice and fairness, something that seems to have slipped your mind, Sheriff. He turned his gaze to the assembled townsfolk, his expression softening slightly. I understand your worries, but I ask you to trust me. I know Clara, and she is not the monster this poster depicts. Give her a chance. Give us a chance to prove her innocence. Silence descended, broken only by the crackling lanterns. The town stood divided, caught between fear and faith, doubt and devotion. Jedediah remained firm, a solitary bulwark against a tidal wave of uncertainty, his love for Clara his only defense. The meeting dissolved without resolution, leaving a palpable tension in its wake. As the townsfolk dispersed, muttering amongst themselves, Jedediah felt a cold dread coil in his stomach. The coming days promised danger, not just from faraway enemies, but from the very community he held dear. He needed to shield Clara, not only from external threats but from the spreading distrust within Harmony Gulch. He needed to exonerate her, to prove her worth, before panic consumed them all. He caught Martha's eye, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He had at least one ally in this maelstrom, but it wouldn't be enough. He had to sway hearts and minds to rekindle the Bonner spirit of community. Before it was too late, he had to restore Clara's reputation in the eyes of the town, and perhaps redeem his own soul in the process. That night, cloaked in darkness, Jedediah stood sentinel outside their cabin, his Winchester rifle a comforting weight across his lap. Clara slept soundly within, oblivious to the gathering storm both within and beyond the walls. He scanned the shadowed woods, his senses amplified. He wouldn't let anyone harm her, not Silas, not the sheriff, not the townspeople. He would stand and fight for her, protect her, and prove her innocence, even if it meant facing the entire world alone. His love for her burned like a fierce flame, a beacon cutting through the blur. Darkness, guiding him through fear and uncertainty. It was a love that had resurrected him, giving him purpose, a reason to fight, a future he never dared to imagine. And he would not let it be extinguished. He would confront whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with his love, his loyalty, and his unshakable resolve. He was Jedediah Stone, and he would not yield. Flames in the night, Clara bolted upright, her senses screaming. It wasn't the silence that woke her, but the absence of it. The usual creaks and groans of the ranch house settling were replaced by an ominous crackling. A faint, acrid smell pricked her nostrils smoke. Her eyes snapped open, and a flickering orange glow danced on the bedroom wall. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. She shoved Jedediah, her voice a strangled whisper. "Jed! Wake up! Something's wrong." Jedediah, a heavy sleeper, stirred groggily. "What is it, darlin'?" he mumbled, reaching for her. "Smoke, Jed. I smell smoke." Clara scrambled out of bed, rushing to the window. The sight that greeted her stole her breath. Flames licked hungrily at the side of the barn, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the yard. "The barn! It's on fire!" He was instantly awake, his movements sharp and decisive. He grabbed his rifle from beside the bed. "Stay here, Clara. Look, the door." He was out the door before she could protest, his boots pounding on the wooden floorboards. Clara, however, had no intention of staying put. Jedediah might be strong, but he couldn't handle this alone. She grabbed a shawl, threw it around her shoulders, and followed him out into the night. The heat hit her like a wall, the smell of burning wood thick and choking. The barn, usually a comforting presence, was now a roaring inferno, the flames painting the night sky a terrifying orange. Jedediah was already shouting, trying to open the furred barn doors. "Horses! Get out here!" He strained against the heavy wooden planks, the heat searing his skin. The animals inside were panicked, their terrified whinnies cutting through the roar of the fire. Clara ran to his side, grabbing the other door. Together they heaved, managing to wrench it open just enough to slip inside. The smoke was almost unbearable, stinging her eyes and burning her throat. The horses were huddled at the back of their stalls, their eyes wide with terror. "Easy, girl," Jedediah crooned to his mare, Bess, moving slowly, speaking in a calming voice. "Easy now. We're gonna get you out of here." He managed to unlatch her stall, gently coaxing her forward. Bess, usually skittish, seemed to recognize his voice, allowing him to lead her towards the open door. Clara worked on the other horses, her movements quick and efficient. She'd grown up around horses. She knew their fear and how to soothe them. She managed to free 2 more, slapping their rumps to urge them out of the burning barn. The heat was intensifying, the roof timbers beginning to groan ominously. "Clara, get out," Jedediah yelled, leading Bess away from the building. "It's gonna collapse." But Clara couldn't leave the last horse. A young colt named Lucky, paralyzed with fear in the corner stall. He was trembling, his eyes rolling in panic. She reached for him, speaking softly. "It's all right, Lucky. It's all right. We're going to get you out." Suddenly, a section of the roof caved in, sending a shower of sparks and burning debris down around them. Clara cried out, shielding her face with her arm. The colt reared, nearly knocking her over. Jedediah saw the collapse, and his heart leaped into his throat. He dropped Bess's reins and charged back into the burning barn, heedless of the danger. He reached Clara just as another section of the roof gave way. He grabbed her, pulling her towards the door, shoving her ahead of him. "Run, Clara, run," he shouted, pushing her out into the relative safety of the yard. He turned back for the colt, but it was too late. The entire roof was collapsing, sending a wall of flames and smoke billowing outwards. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that Lucky was gone. He stumbled out of the barn, coughing and choking, his clothes singed, his face blackened with soot. He grabbed Clara, pulling her close, his heart pounding in his chest. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the soot. "I'm okay, Jed." But Lucky. They watched in helpless silence as the barn was consumed by the flames. The fire raged, a furious orange beast devouring everything in its path. The heat was intense, forcing them to retreat further and further away. The other livestock, now safely in the pasture, milled around nervously, their eyes wide with fear. The barn was more than just a building. It was the heart of Jedediah's ranch, the place where he stored his hay, his tools, his memories. Watching it burn was like watching a part of himself being destroyed. He knew who was responsible. Silas. This was his message, a fiery declaration of war. As the flames finally began to die down, Leaving behind a smoldering skeleton of twisted metal and charred wood, Jedediah turned to Clara, his eyes hard. "This changes things, Clara. This means he's not going to stop." Clara met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Then we have to be ready," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "We have to fight back." He pulled her close, holding her tight. "I won't let him hurt you, Clara. I promise you that. I'll burn the world down first." He knew that promise was dangerous, but he meant every word. The rules he had lived by, the quiet life he had craved, were gone. Now there was only Clara, and the man who wanted to destroy her. And Jedediah Stone was ready to fight. Rebuilding trust, the barn's charred skeleton scratched against the sky, a grim reminder of Silas's malice. Jedediah stood beside Clara, the sharp tang of burnt wood assaulting their senses. He raked a hand through his hair, a gesture betraying more weariness than anger. "Time will heal this," he said, his voice a monotone, the usual warmth extinguished. Clara covered his hand with hers, her touch a vital current in the bleak tableau. "We'll raise it again, Jedediah." Side by side, her gaze locked with his, unwavering, and he glimpsed not only resolve, but a profound love that outshone even the memory of the inferno. He returned the pressure, drawing strength from her unwavering spirit. "Together," he affirmed, the word a solemn pledge. The subsequent days blurred into a relentless cycle of labor. Jedediah, typically a recluse, found himself shoulder to shoulder with his neighbors. Men he'd previously only acknowledged with a curt nod now wielded hammers alongside him, their faces etched with determination. Sarah Miller delivered overflowing hampers of sustenance, her baked goods a small solace against the backdrop of devastation. Even cranky old Hemlock, rarely seen beyond his porch, offered his oxen team to help transport lumber. "Didn't feel right, Jedediah," Sheriff Barlow admitted, swiping grime from his brow as he paused for a breather. "Standing idle while a decent man gets torched. Besides," he added with a glance at Clara, "a woman like that deserves a fair go." Clara, sleeves pushed up, joined the men, hefting planks and providing tools. She moved with a fluid strength that belied the demanding labor, her presence a quiet wellspring of resilience. Catching Barlow's words, she returned his gaze, a silent gratitude exchanged. The hushed conjectures had ebbed, replaced by a measured acceptance. The fire, in its cruel way, had laid the foundation for a tentative accord. Jedediah observed her, his heart brimming with affection. He watched her instructing young Billy on the proper nail-driving technique, her smile genuine, her laughter a bright note in the smoky atmosphere. He noticed her sharing a water canteen with Hemlock, the old man actually managing a faint smile. He saw a woman who, despite her shadowed past, was building a future, one painstaking piece at a time. As twilight painted the heavens in fiery hues one evening, Jedediah and Clara rested on a makeshift seat, assessing their handiwork. The barn remained unfinished, but its frame stood tall, a skeletal symbol of optimism against the fading light. "It's more than I dared hope for," Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "The people I never expected them to step forward." Jedediah embraced her, drawing her close. "They're good folk, Clara, just wary. They needed to see the real you." She rested her head on his shoulder. "And what did they find, Jedediah?" He kissed her hair. "They discovered a woman of strength, compassion, and courage. A woman who tackles hard work head-on, who cares deeply for this place. A woman who is loved." Clara sighed, a sound of pure contentment. I never imagined I'd find this serenity. Jedediah stiffened, the word serenity seeming a dangerous luxury in their precarious world. It's not over yet, Clara. Silas remains a threat. Her body tensed imperceptibly, but she didn't flinch. I know, but I'm done running, Jedediah. This is my home, with you. We'll confront him together. He framed her face with his hands, his gaze unwavering. We will. And I vow, Clara, he won't harm you again. The following days saw continued progress, the barn steadily rising from the ashes. The steady beat of hammers and the whine of saws resonated through the valley, a song of renewal. The townspeople, united by a common purpose, persevered tirelessly, their initial reservations giving way to a camaraderie that caught them off guard. Sarah Miller, never one to mince words, confronted Clara one afternoon. Clara, dear, we owe you an apology. All of us. We judged too quickly, heeding whispers and conjecture. But we see you now. We see your true heart. Clara smiled, her eyes glistening. Thank you, Sarah. That means the world to me. As the barn edged closer to completion, Jedediah found himself constantly vigilant. He knew Silas wouldn't remain in the shadows indefinitely. The man was a festering wound, and a wound required decisive action. He began carrying his rifle everywhere, his movements deliberate, his senses sharpened. One evening, Jedediah discovered a note pinned to the half-built barn door. It was unsigned, but the source was undeniable. The crude script and the venomous message left no room for doubt. Leave, Clara, or it will get much worse. He crumpled the note in his fist, his jaw clenched. This extended beyond Clara now. It encompassed the entire town, their burgeoning sense of community, the fragile peace they were striving to cultivate. Silas threatened it all. He showed the note to Clara, studying her reaction. She read it, her expression hardening. He's not going to relent, is he? She asked, her voice devoid of fear, only steely determination. No, Jedediah confirmed. He's not, which means we have to stop him. He dedicated the ensuing days to preparation. He honed his knives, cleaned his rifle, and formulated a plan. He anticipated Silas striking again, and he intended to be ready. He confided his concerns to Sheriff Barlow, who, although reluctant to intervene without definitive proof, agreed to intensify patrols around the town. On the evening the barn was finally finished, a celebration erupted. The entire town gathered, bringing food, music, and laughter. The air pulsed with the aroma of barbecue and the lively strains of fiddles. It was a night of joy, of unity, of defiance. As Jedediah watched Clara twirl with Sarah Miller, her face alight with happiness, he knew he would shield her at any cost. He surveyed the throng, searching for any sign of Silas. He saw only smiling faces, but he felt Silas's presence, lurking just beyond the light, awaiting his moment. Later, as the celebration subsided and the final guests departed, Jedediah and Clara stood alone within the newly erected barn. The scent of fresh-cut timber permeated the air, a vibrant contrast to the lingering specter of the fire. "We did it," Clara murmured, her voice hushed. "We rebuilt it." Jedediah drew her close, his arm around her. "We did, and whatever comes next, we'll confront it together." He sensed the impending storm, but he was prepared. He had Clara by his side, reinforced by the unwavering loyalty of his community. He was no longer a solitary rancher. He was a guardian, a husband, an integral part of something grander than himself. And he would fight to defend it all. The hidden stash, the rebuilt barn, Its seasoned planks, radiant in the afternoon light, stood as a monument to communal fortitude. Jedediah, weary but resolute, leaned against its sun-baked side, the mingled aromas of sawn timber and honest toil permeating his being. The labor of the day had sunk into his muscles, yet a quiet contentment bloomed in his chest, a feeling absent for too long. Clara, within the coop, tended their new brood, her lilting laughter carried on the breeze. He longed to join her, to share in this brief respite. Yet a persistent anxiety gnawed at him, a disquieting shadow threatening their hard-won tranquility. He attributed it to Silas, the looming menace that haunted his thoughts. But a deeper intuition pointed to something more insidious, a subtle alteration in Clara's comportment that eluded his grasp. She seemed withdrawn, lost in her own world. He'd observe her gazing pensively at the horizon, her brow creased in worry, a fleeting sadness masked by a practiced smile. He needed to speak to her, to dismantle the nascent barrier between them. "Back shortly," he announced, his voice raspy with weariness. She emerged, cheeks flushed with exertion, wisps of straw clinging to her apron. "Where are you off to, Jedediah?" Her question held a note of concern that simultaneously warmed and unsettled him. "Just into town. Need to replenish our supplies." A fabricated smile stretched his lips, a desperate attempt at reassurance. Deception tasted foul, but he couldn't articulate the premonition that gripped him. He bypassed the town, instead retracing his steps towards the house, the surrounding stillness amplifying the frantic rhythm of his heart. He chided himself for his paranoia, for letting apprehension overwhelm him. Yet the sensation persisted, a frigid fist clenching his insides. He pushed open the front door. Clara's signature lavender scent filled his senses. The house, absent her presence, felt stark and expectant. He drifted into their bedroom, his gaze settling on the bed. The meticulously crafted quilt, a vibrant tapestry of color in the otherwise austere space, lay undisturbed. He lowered himself onto the edge, the aged springs groaning in protest. His calloused hand reached out, tracing the quilt's intricate patterns. It was then he noted it, a subtle irregularity beneath the mattress, an abnormal elevation. Curiosity wrestled with propriety. He shouldn't pry, violate Clara's privacy, but the unsettling feeling proved too compelling to dismiss. After a moment's hesitation, he lifted the mattress's edge. Concealed beneath, nestled between the wooden supports and the threadbare ticking, lay a compact leather pouch. His heart skipped a beat. He knew instinctively what it signified. Money. A considerable sum. He lifted it, the supple leather aged and pliant beneath his touch. It possessed a weighty significance. He loosened the drawstring, his fingers exhibiting a slight tremor. Within, neatly arranged, were bills of varying face value. Enough for passage, enough to vanish. His breath hitched. Disappointment engulfed him, a bitter wave threatening to drown him whole. Betrayed, duped, the vows of fidelity, the shared ambition of a life entwined. Had it all been a facade? Had she been plotting this clandestine departure all along? A sudden memory surfaced, her searching gaze fixed on the distant horizon, a poignant melancholy gracing her eyes. Was she contemplating escape? Abandonment? And if so, the motive remained elusive. He shoved the pouch back into its hiding place, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He felt ill, a nauseating blend of anger and wounded pride churning within. He rose abruptly, dislodging a small vase from the nightstand. It shattered against the floorboards, the sharp report punctuating his shattered beliefs. He stormed from the dwelling, his boots grinding against the gravel path. He needed to confront her, demand an explanation. But a part of him resisted, recoiling from the validation of his deepest anxieties. He located her in the chicken coop, humming a gentle tune as she scattered feed. The chickens pecked industriously at her feet, a tableau of domestic tranquility that felt cruelly ironic. He stood silhouetted in the entrance, his shadow falling upon her. She turned, her face illuminating at his arrival. "Jedediah! Back so soon?" Her smile wavered under his scrutiny. The animation in her eyes dissipated, replaced by a flicker of trepidation. "What's the matter?" Speech deserted him, the words lodged in his throat. He could only stare, his gaze conveying a painful cocktail of hurt and bewilderment. I found it," he finally managed, his voice barely audible. Her complexion paled. She understood. The realization of her exposure dawned in her eyes. "Found what?" she parried, her voice shaking slightly. "The money, Clara. Under the mattress." All color leached from her face. She remained motionless, her eyes widened with apprehension. The chickens continued their pecking, oblivious to the charged atmosphere. "Why, Clara?" he questioned, his voice gaining volume with each word, the pent-up frustration erupting. "Why conceal it from me? What were you planning?" She offered no response, her gaze darting around as if searching for an avenue of escape. "Clara, please," he implored, his tone softening. "Tell me the truth. I believed we shared trust." Tears welled in her eyes. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Then explain it," he said, his voice hardening. "Tell me why you intended to leave." She retreated a step, her hand grasping the coop's wall for support. I wasn't planning to leave," she whispered, her voice imbued with desperation. "Then what was its purpose, Clara? What did you intend with the money?" He advanced, his shadow engulfing her. "Tell me the truth, Clara, please." She squeezed her eyes shut, a solitary tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "It was for you, Jedediah," she whispered. "I was attempting to safeguard you." His brow furrowed in confusion. "Protect me? From what?" She reopened her eyes, her gaze locking with his. "From him, Jedediah. From Silas. He will persist until he achieves his aims." "And what does he desire, Clara?" he asked, his voice low and threatening. "Me," she confessed, her voice trembling. "He wants me gone. And I was prepared to go, Jedediah. I was departing to shield you from him. I didn't want him to cause you harm because of me." He stared, his mind reeling. He had been consumed by his own wounded pride, neglecting her perspective. She wasn't contemplating desertion. She was acting as his defender. But her lack of faith still smarted. "Why keep it from me, Clara?" he asked, his tone a mixture of relief and hurt. "Why not confide in me enough to tell me?" She averted her gaze, contrite. "I was afraid, Jedediah. Fearful of your reaction, afraid you would reject me. I dreaded losing you." He reached out, gently cradling her face in his hands. "You won't lose me, Clara," he reassured her softly. "But we must embrace honesty. We must place our trust in each other. Otherwise, this cannot endure." She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "I understand," she whispered. "I apologize, Jedediah. I am deeply sorry." He enfolded her in his arms, holding her close. The tempest of anger and fear had abated, replaced by a profound sense of determination. He would not permit Silas to wrest her from his grasp. He would defend her, regardless of the cost. They would confront this together, as comrades, as partners. The concealed cache had unveiled a wounding truth, yet it had also served to solidify their bond. Challenges lay ahead, adversaries loomed, but their unity would be their shield. A confession of love and fear, the unspoken filled the small cabin, a palpable weight. Jedediah's gaze remained fixed on Clara as she stared at the fire's dwindling glow, her expression a map of sorrow deepening with each silent heartbeat. He'd challenged her, yes, but witnessing such raw vulnerability, his anger had evaporated, replaced by a surge of protectiveness he hadn't anticipated. "Clara," he murmured, his voice a deep vibration that cut through the stillness. "Tell me what's wrong." She reacted as if stung, her eyes finally lifting to meet his. The firelight painted shimmering mosaics of orange and crimson in her glistening eyes. "This isn't about you, Jedediah. It was never about you." Her words, barely audible, were roughened by anguish. He knelt, enfolding her hands in his. They were frigid, trembling faintly against his calloused palms. He squeezed them gently, offering what comfort he could. "Then what is it?" "This money, why the secrecy?" She snatched her hands away, pivoting sharply and presenting him with her back. At the solitary window, she became a silhouette against the impenetrable blackness of the ranch at night. The wind keened outside, the window panes shivering under its assault, a forlorn lament that echoed the chaos within the small space. "Because her eye was petrified," she finally breathed, her voice fracturing. "Terrified of what Silas might do, of what he could inflict on you." Jedediah straightened, his pulse hammering. That name, Silas Blackwood, was a venomous whisper, a name synonymous with unchecked power, cold-bloodedness, and a dark aura that clung like grave dirt. "Silas? What part does he play in this?" Clara turned, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, luminous in the dim light. "He covets me, Jedediah. He always has." A shiver racked her frame, as if touched by an icy phantom hand. "I fled to escape him. I believed that by coming here, by becoming your wife, I'd find sanctuary. But he refuses to relinquish his hold. He'll never let me go." The gravity of her confession descended upon Jedediah, a suffocating burden. He knew Blackwood's reputation, the fear he cultivated in the townsfolk. The thought of that man fixating on Clara, threatening her, ignited a furious fire within him. "He won't lay a finger on you, Clara," Jedediah declared, his voice edged with steel. "I won't permit it." She shook her head, tears now coursing freely down her cheeks, carving paths through the dust. "You don't grasp the situation, Jedediah. His influence is vast. He controls half the land. He has eyes and ears everywhere. He'll destroy you. And I couldn't bear that." He moved closer, cradling her face, gently wiping the tears with his thumbs. "Look at me, Clara." He waited until their eyes locked. "I'm not intimidated by him. And I won't allow him to terrorize you either. We'll confront him together. We will find a way through this." She searched his gaze, seeking some reassurance, a flicker of comprehension regarding the peril they faced. But why? Why risk everything for someone you barely know? Jedediah offered a gentle, melancholy smile, one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I know enough, Clara. I see your kindness, your strength, and your inherent worthiness of happiness. And my feelings for you run deeper than I ever imagined." Clara's breath caught. She stared at him, her eyes registering a spectrum of emotions: disbelief, apprehension, and something that hinted at joy. "Jedediah, He inhaled deeply, his heart battering against his ribs. He hadn't intended to voice the sentiment, but the words surged from his depths, demanding release. I believe I'm falling for you, Clara." The ensuing quiet was profound, punctuated only by the wind's mournful cry. Clara's eyes widened, a vortex of conflicting emotions swirling within their depths. I don't know what to say," she faltered, her voice trembling slightly. He softly brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "You don't need to say anything, just to let me shield you." Clara closed her eyes, taking a steadying breath. When she reopened them, they reflected a newfound resolve. "I'm frightened, Jedediah, utterly terrified. But I'm tired of running. I wish to remain here, with you. I long to build a life here, a genuine life, but I dread that Silas will shatter it all." He drew her close, enfolding her in his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. He felt her trembling, but also sensed an inner fortitude, a determination that mirrored his own. "He won't," Jedediah whispered, burying his face in her hair. "He won't seize anything from us. We'll fight him, Clara, together. We'll defend what is ours." Clara clung to him, her face pressed into his shoulder. "I love you, Jedediah," she confessed, her voice muffled against his shirt front. "I never imagined I could love again, but I do. I love you, and that's what frightens me the most. I don't want you to suffer because of me." Jedediah's embrace tightened, his heart swelling with love and fierce resolve. He would not permit fear to consume her. He would not concede victory to Silas Blackwood. He vowed to safeguard her, even at the cost of everything. He gently tilted her chin, meeting her gaze. "Nothing will befall me. Clara, I give you my word. We're united in this. We'll confront him together. And we'll prevail. Because our love eclipses his venom. It surpasses his clout. It trumps everything." He lowered his head and kissed her, a lingering tender kiss that sealed their pact, a promise whispered between parted lips. The kiss was a testament of love, a pledge of protection, and a declaration of war. A kiss tinged with trepidation, yet permeated with hope, the hope of a future they would defend as one. The sheriff's demand, a brown swirling plume on the horizon, heralded their coming. A gritty exhalation that painted the sky before they even reached the crest overlooking Jedediah's land. Jedediah, jaw clenched, watched from the porch, Clara a silent sentinel at his back. The lead horse was unmistakable. Sheriff Bart Collins, astride a dark roan marked by a stark white blaze. Behind him, the posse, a motley assortment of townsfolk and unfamiliar faces spread out, encircling the house and outbuildings. The sun hammered down, the air thick enough to taste. A hawk spiraled in the distance, its lonely cry underscoring the fear clawing at Clara's insides. Her fingers dug into the fabric of Jedediah's shirt, knuckles bone white. He reached behind, his rough hand enveloping hers, a wordless assurance of terror. "Safety." Collins halted his mount, the animal snorting and stamping the baked earth. He sat ramrod straight, his gaze sweeping the ranch, pausing first on Jedediah, then hardening as it fixed on Clara. He dismounted, boots hitting the dry ground with a call. Heavy thud. The posse followed, their expressions grim, hands hovering near their weapons. Jedediah, Colin's voice, amplified by the stillness, held no trace of cordiality. "I have a warrant for Clara Whitmore. She's wanted for questioning concerning a murder back in Redemption Gulch." Clara gasped, her grip vise-like. He turned slightly, their eyes meeting. In her gaze he saw stark fear, a desperate plea for belief, and the enduring spark of the love they'd found. He squeezed her hand, then faced Collins, his expression now an implacable mask. "Murder?" Jedediah's tone was even, though a thread of steel ran beneath it. "You're wrong, Bart. Clara wouldn't harm a soul." Collins' lips twisted in a sneer. "That's for the courts to decide. I have my orders. Come on out, Miss Whitmore. Let's not make this any harder than it has to be." Hidden behind Jedediah, Clara's breath hitched in her throat. She felt the collective weight of their stares, the palpable hostility emanating from the group. Jedediah remained a steadfast barrier against the encroaching threat. "She's not going anywhere with you, Bart," Jedediah stated, his voice low and dangerous. Colin's eyes narrowed to slits. "You're obstructing justice, Jedediah. You know I can't allow that." "Justice?" Jedediah's scoff was laced with scorn. "This has nothing to do with justice, Bart. This is you, abusing your authority to settle an old grudge." He hadn't forgotten the humiliation Collins had inflicted years ago, a trivial dispute over water rights that Collins had exploited to publicly demean him. The sheriff nursed a long memory, as did Jedediah. "Don't flatter yourself," Collins snapped, his face flushing crimson. "This is about a woman suspected of a capital crime. Step aside, and nobody gets hurt." He cast a significant glance at the posse, a silent promise hanging in the air. Jedediah's gaze swept the assembled men, their faces a tableau of apprehension and a raw eagerness to please. He recognized some of them Old Man Hemlock from the general store, callow Billy Carter, trying to look formidable, and Hank, the blacksmith, his brow furrowed with conflict. These were his neighbors, men he'd shared stories and whiskey with, men he'd offered aid to in times of hardship. Yet, here they stood, a hostile force mobilized to enforce the sheriff's decree. "You brought these men here to intimidate me, Bart?" Jedediah questioned, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think they'll stand by while you drag an innocent woman away based solely on your say-so?" Hemlock shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. Billy Carter puffed out his chest, his grip tightening on his rifle. Hank, the blacksmith, edged forward, his expression etched with worry. "Jedediah," Hank began, his voice hesitant, "we just want to do the right thing. If she's innocent, she has nothing to fear." "Innocent until proven guilty, Hank," Jedediah countered. "But Bart's already reached his verdict. He's not interested in the truth." Collins slammed his fist against his leg. "Enough of this!" He'd bellowed. Last chance, Jedediah. Hand over the woman, or I'll be forced to take her." The air vibrated with tension. The sun beat down without mercy. The silence punctuated only by the restless shuffling of the horses and the heavy breaths of the men. Clara burrowed closer to Jedediah, her body trembling almost imperceptibly. He looked down at her, his eyes reflecting a love that eclipsed all fear. He knew what he had to do. He wouldn't permit Collins to seize her, not knowing what horrors awaited in Redemption Gulch. He would not let Silas Blackwood's scheme succeed. Sworn an oath, a solemn vow to protect Clara, and he intended to honor it. He turned back to Collins, his jaw hard, his eyes burning with defiance. "You're not taking her, Bart," he declared, his voice ringing with unshakable resolve. "She stays here. With me." Collins' face contorted into a mask of pure rage. "So be it, Jedediah," he snarled. "You've made your choice." He drew his revolver, the metallic snick echoing in the stifling air. The posse mirrored his action, leveling their rifles at Jedediah and Clara. The confrontation had begun. The battle lines were drawn in the dust, and Jedediah knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was a fight he had to win. Siege at Stone Ranch, the rifle's report tore through the taut stillness, an ugly rent in the quiet. No mere warning, the projectile screamed past Jedediah's temple, embedding itself with a thud into the barn's sturdy timbers. A plume of dust erupted, the sharp tang of spent powder assaulting his senses. "They're not messing around, Clara," he hollered, his words nearly lost in the answering storm of lead unleashed by the posse. From her post at the house window, Clara returned their fire with Jedediah's Winchester, the weapon kicking against her frame. Her actions were precise, efficient a world away from the haunted look that had plagued her days before. Now, her gaze was like tempered steel, fixed and mirroring the stark resolve hardening her features. "Neither are we," she stated, her tone even, yet edged with unwavering grit. Jedediah dove behind a hay bale fortress, snatching up his own rifle. A swift peek revealed Sheriff Collins, his face contorted with self-righteous fury, laced with a disturbing hint of personal malice, barking orders to press the attack. The posse, fanned out, was attempting to encircle the homestead, severing any chance of flight. "They're flanking," Clara yelled, her voice strained. "We have to keep them at bay," Jedediah nodded, understanding passing between them. Their plan, rudimentary as it was, had been forged in the crucible of long, anxious nights. The house and barn, like opposing bastions, afforded limited protection, but forced their assailants into the teeth of a crossfire. Jedediah squeezed the trigger, aiming for Deputy Miller, slithering through the tall grass toward the barn. He watched Miller's retreat into the verdant depths. "Good one," he shouted to Clara, a grim satisfaction blossoming. The fusillade intensified, a relentless downpour of projectiles ripping through the air. Rounds slammed into the house's wooden siding, sending splinters flying. One tore through the window frame, showering Clara in a glittering rain of glass shards. Unfazed, she simply ducked, reloaded, and resumed firing. "Damn Collins," Jedediah muttered, rearming his weapon. This wasn't just about upholding the law. Not anymore. It was personal vendetta. Collins had always begrudged him, his independence, his quiet strength. Now, he saw an opportunity to finally cut him down, to flex his authority. A bullet pinged off the metal trough nearby, erupting into a shower of water and metallic fragments. He cursed, scrambling for a better position. The assault was escalating. He had to divert their attention from the house, allow Clara a moment of respite. "Clara, I'm making a dash for the shed," he yelled. "Cover me." "Jedediah, don't. It's too risky." Her voice was laced with alarm. "I have to," he retorted, his voice firm. "Just keep them occupied." With a bracing breath, Jedediah exploded from behind the hay bales, sprinting toward the small outbuilding. The posse instantly shifted their focus, peppering the ground around him. He felt the displaced air as bullets whistled past, heard their angry buzz. Reaching the shed, he hurled himself inside, slamming the door. The interior was cramped, musty, filled with tools and farm implements. Windowless save for a narrow gap in the rear wall, it was meager shelter, yet an improvement. Peering through the aperture, he gauged the situation. The posse was advancing, emboldened by his apparent disadvantage. They believed they had him trapped. A grim smile touched his lips. They were mistaken. Taking careful aim, he fired through the slit, felling one of the men creeping towards the house. The man hit the dirt, writhing and clutching his leg. A collective intake of breath rippled through the posse. Clara seized her chance, unleashing a withering barrage from the house, forcing them to seek cover. Jedediah reloaded, firing again, maintaining the pressure. The battle raged, an eternity etched in bullets and smoke as the sun began its slow descent, painting the ranch in long, ominous shadows. The air hung heavy with the odors of gunpowder, sweat, and dread. Jedediah's ears rang, his muscles screamed, but he couldn't yield. He wouldn't. Abruptly, the posse's gunfire diminished. Jedediah strained to see through the slit. Collins stood, his face crimson with frustration, waving his men back. "We'll be back, Stone," Collins roared, his voice carrying across the land. "And next time, we won't be so merciful." Jedediah watched the posse melt into the encroaching gloom. He expelled a shaky breath, his body trembling with weariness and adrenaline. "Jedediah!" Clara's voice cut through the air, thick with relief. "Are you okay?" "I'm all right," he answered, his voice ragged. "You?" "Just scrapes," she replied. "But what now?" Jedediah emerged from the shed, walking slowly towards the house. He gazed at Clara, her face streaked with grime and powder, her eyes reflecting both fear and fierce determination. He knew this was far from resolved. Collins would return, reinforced. But he also knew he would defend Clara to his last breath. "We prepare," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "We prepare for a siege." Blackwood arrives. The wine in Jedediah's ears ebbed, displaced by a vicious spike of pain lancing through his left shoulder. Blood, sharp and coppery, coated his tongue. Clara knelt beside him, her features a study in stark terror, mingled with unwavering resolve. A trembling hand pressed a thick compress against the gushing wound. "Jedediah, stay with me," she urged, her voice shredded with anxiety. He hacked, the simple act igniting a fresh inferno in his shoulder. I'm here," he rasped, his vision blurring at the edges. Collins's sneering visage seared itself onto his mind. That shot had been a death sentence. Clara tore a length from her petticoat, cinching it above the injury, a makeshift tourniquet. "Keep pressure here," she commanded, her eyes blazing. She scrambled back toward the cabin, a whirlwind of focused motion. He tracked her retreat, a cold fist clenching his gut. He knew her intent to chamber another round. The air stank of singed powder and cordite. The posse's hasty departure was already fading into the background, but Jedediah harbored no illusion Collins would be back. He wouldn't let it go. Not now. Perhaps not ever. His gaze snagged on Clara, the dying sun gilding her hair, each strand alight like spun gold. He had to shield her. He must. He wrestled himself upright, bracing against the rough-hewn logs. Each shallow breath was a victory. The ache was a relentless, throbbing presence, but he couldn't surrender to it. Not yet. The measured cadence of approaching horses shattered the fragile quiet. Jedediah squinted, his hand instinctively finding the comforting grip of his revolver. This wasn't Collins. The riders approached from the east, from the direction of town. A scant few 3, maybe 4. Clara reappeared, rifle held ready, her expression an inscrutable mask. She took her place beside him, her muscles coiled, her eyes sweeping the darkening landscape. As the riders neared, their forms resolving in the gloaming, a bone-deep chill slithered down Jedediah's spine, a premonition that transcended his injury. The lead rider, an imposing figure draped in a dark suit, a stark silhouette against the ochre terrain, rode a magnificent black stallion, its flanks gleaming like polished obsidian. Jedediah recognized him instantly. Silas Blackwood. Blackwood hauled his mount to a stop a few yards distant, his obsidian eyes locked on Clara. A mirthless smile tugged at his lips, a promise of cruelty barely contained. "Clara," he purred, his voice like motor oil. "I've been searching for you." Clara remained unfazed. She leveled the rifle, the barrel unwavering. "Vacate my property, Blackwood." Blackwood chuckled. A low, menacing rumble. "Your property? Hardly. Everything you possess, everything you will possess, belongs to me." He inclined his head toward the men behind him. "Ensure she refrains from any rash decisions." 2 men dismounted, their faces set in grim lines. They moved with slow deliberation, flanking Clara. Jedediah attempted to rise, but a searing jolt ripped through his shoulder, and he slumped back against the wall. "Jedediah!" Clara cried, her voice laced with alarm. Blackwood dismounted, his gaze never breaking from Clara's. He advanced with a predatory grace. "Lower the rifle, Clara. You know you cannot prevail." "I harbor no fear of you," Clara declared, her voice trembling slightly. "Don't you?" Blackwood halted a few feet away. "You ought to. You are well acquainted with my capabilities." He inclined his head, his gaze gleaming in the fading light. "All I seek is the return of what you pilfered from me." "I stole nothing," Clara countered, her grip tightening on the rifle. "The ledgers, Clara. The documents. Irrefutable proof of my endeavors." Blackwood's tone was dangerously soft. "You comprehend their contents. You understand the devastation their disclosure would wreak upon me." Jedediah's mind raced. Ledgers? Documents? What secret was Clara guarding? Blackwood took another step, extending his hand. "Simply relinquish them, Clara, and this charade concludes. Rejoin me, and we shall relegate this unpleasantness to oblivion." "Never," Clara spat, her eyes blazing with defiance. "Death would be preferable to returning to your grasp." Blackwood's smile evaporated. His features hardened, his gaze growing glacial and pitiless. "So be it." He signaled to his men. "Seize her." The 2 men lunged for Clara, grabbing her arms. She fought with ferocity, kicking and screaming, but their superior strength prevailed. They wrenched the rifle from her grip, tossing it to the dirt. "Release me!" she shrieked, her voice a blend of fury and terror. Jedediah propelled himself upward, disregarding the agony that threatened to consume him. He staggered toward them, revolver drawn. "Release her!" he bellowed. Blackwood turned to face him, his expression dripping with contempt. "You? What resistance can you offer? You are a wounded animal, barely capable of standing." He lifted his hand, silencing Jedediah with a dismissive gesture. "This is between Clara and myself. Do not interfere." "She is my wife," Jedediah ground out, his voice ragged. "And I shall not permit you to abduct her." Blackwood emitted a harsh, hollow laugh. "Your wife? You truly believe a mere piece of paper bestows ownership? She belongs to me. She always has." He turned back to his henchman. "Place her upon the horse." The men hauled Clara toward Blackwood's stallion. She resisted at every step, her cries reverberating through the valley. Jedediah stood by, a helpless spectator to her plight, his body racked with pain and impotence. He would not permit them to take her. He couldn't. He raised his revolver, aiming it at Blackwood's skull. "Release her, Blackwood," he asserted, his voice trembling yet resolute, "or I will dispatch you to hell." Blackwood remained unmoved. He stared at Jedediah, his eyes radiating an almost ethereal indifference. "Proceed," he murmured. "Depress the trigger." But understand, rancher, that by extinguishing my life, you simultaneously sign her death warrant. Others share my knowledge of her illicit possessions, and they lack my restraint." He paused, letting his threat hang heavy in the air. "Consider your options with care, Jedediah. Her life or my own?" Showdown at dawn, a wet, rattling cough seized Jedediah, leaving a coppery tang on his tongue. But Clara's wide-eyed fright cut through the haze, as did the rapacious glint in Silas Blackwood's gaze. A glacial resolve hardened within him. He wouldn't surrender her to this viper. He straightened, a searing pain ripping through his flank, and leaned on the porch railing, its coarse grain digging into his flesh. "Blackwood," he croaked, his voice a thread in the taut air. "You crave her? Those ledgers?" Silas's lips peeled back in a cruel smile that failed to ignite any warmth in his eyes. "Astute, rancher. Acknowledging reality. At last. Relinquish the girl, and perhaps you'll greet the dawn." Jedediah spat, the vile act sending fresh torment through him, yet he remained upright, gaze unwavering. "I'll afford you a chance to take them. A just one." A murmur rippled through the gathering onlookers. News had spread like brush fire, a reckoning at the Randall spread. They stood back, their faces masks of dread and morbid fascination, lured by the specter of impending violence. "A chance?" Blackwood echoed, one brow lifting in mocking query. "What could a crippled hound like you possibly offer?" Jedediah's knuckles whitened on the railing. He met Blackwood's stare, his own eyes blazing with a fierce light that defied his weakened state. A contest. As the sun bleeds over the horizon, high noon is a pantomime. The breaking of dawn? That's when true men settle matters. Man against man. No cutthroats. Just you and I. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jedediah, don't. He will kill you." He shifted his gaze, softening as he beheld her. "I have to, Clara. I won't yield you to him." He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate curve of her cheek. "Don't fret. I'll endure." A falsehood, perhaps, but a necessary balm. Blackwood chuckled, a low, guttural sound that promised pain. "A duel? You jest? I haven't indulged in such a barbaric ritual in years." But a flicker of keen anticipation danced in his eyes. He saw Jedediah's frailty, his vulnerability. This was a game in which he fully expected to triumph. "Very well, rancher. Dawn it is. But do not presume I'll coddle you simply because you are posturing as a hero. I am the pragmatist, and I invariably claim what I desire." "There will be no leniency," Jedediah declared, his voice gaining resonance, fueled by adrenaline and raw will. Only two men, settling accounts. Clara clasped him tighter, her voice a desperate entreaty. "Jedediah, no, I beg you. There must be another path. I can depart, return to where I came from. Anything rather than this." "No," he said, his tone resolute, cradling her face in his hands. "You are not going anywhere. This is my place now, and you remain with me." He probed her eyes, seeking a spark of understanding. "Trust me, Clara. I beg you. Only trust me." She scrutinized his face, her own, a canvas of anguish. Finally, she yielded with a nod, a lone tear etching a gleaming trail down her cheek. "I trust you," she breathed, "but vow to me, vow you will be careful." "I vow it," he replied, even as he knew promises were fragile things in a world as merciless as theirs. Blackwood scoffed. Sentimentality. How touching. But Dawn's arrival is swift. I suggest you employ the scant time remaining to bid your farewells. He addressed his men. Let us be gone. Preparations are required. He mounted his steed, his gaze lingering on Clara for a fleeting moment before he spurred the beast onward, his henchmen shadowing him. As they receded, the townsfolk began to scatter, their hushed voices carried on the breeze. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting extended, foreboding shadows across the land. Clara guided Jedediah back into the house, her touch gentle and solicitous. She eased him onto the bed, her face a mask of apprehension. I ought to be tending your wound, she lamented, her voice trembling. But all I can dwell upon is Dawn. Don't concern yourself with me, Jedediah murmured, his voice faint. Worry about yourself. Blackwood is not the only one coveting those ledges. What do you signify? There are others, he revealed, his brow furrowing in pain. Those who would commit any act to ensure those secrets remain interred. Should something happen to me? He trailed off. I'm able to voice the ultimate dread. Do not utter such words. Clara interjected, her voice rising in protest. You are not destined to die. I will not permit it. She commenced cleaning his wound, her touch surprisingly firm and competent. As she ministered, she recounted the saga of the Ledgers, the potent men whose scandals they harbored, the motivations for her flight. She divulged everything, bearing her soul in the meager glow of the kerosene lamp. Jedediah listened, his heart aching for her plight. He now apprehended the magnitude of the peril she faced, the forces leagued against her. And he realized, with a chilling clarity, that this contest was not solely about him and Blackwood. It was about Clara's existence, her liberty, her future. As the night advanced, sleep proved elusive. They lay intertwined, clinging to one another as if they could magically repel the enveloping darkness. The sole sounds were the hushed rhythm of their breathing and the distant keen of a coyote, a mournful lament that mirrored the trepidation in their hearts. The first delicate strokes of dawn painted the firmament a ghostly gray. Clara arose and dressed, her movements measured and silent. She entered the kitchen and initiated the preparation of breakfast, her hands moving with a mechanical precision, her mind consumed with dread. Jedediah observed her, his heart laden with a fusion of love and foreboding. He knew he must exert every ounce of his strength to safeguard her, even if it demanded his own demise. He swung his legs over the bedside, his body protesting with each motion. He dressed with languid care, his hands trembling minutely. He ambled into the kitchen, the aroma of coffee and bacon permeating the air. Clara turned to him, her eyes reflecting a purr, silent supplication. Do not do this, Jedediah, she breathed. Please. It possesses no worth. He clasped her hand, his grip firm. It possesses every worth to me, he declared. You are my everything. He consumed a few morsels of sustenance, forcing the food down his constricted throat. Then he approached the gun cabinet and retrieved his rifle. He inspected the mechanism, his movements honed by years of practice. Clara watched him, her eyes brimming with tears. Vow to me, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Vow to me that you will return. He rotated to face her, his features resolute. I vow to expend every possible effort. He exited the house, into the pale light of dawn. The air was crisp and frigid, and a delicate fog draped the meadows. He could discern the outlines of the townsfolk assembling in the distance, their faces obscured by the mist. He knew they were watching, awaiting the unfolding drama. He proceeded to the CRA. Designated location. A dusty patch of ground at the town's edge. Blackwood was already present, standing erect and imposing, his face grim. He clutched a pistol in his hand, the metal glinting in the weak light. The air thrummed with tension. The only interjections to the silence were the chirping of birds and the faint neigh of a horse. Jedediah halted a few paces from Blackwood, his hand resting on the butt of his own pistol. He scrutinized Blackwood, his eyes reflecting an unwavering determination. "Let us conclude this," he stated, his voice low and steady. "The sooner it concludes, the sooner Clara can know freedom." Blackwood smirked. "Freedom? You genuinely believe you can prevail, rancher? You are a simpleton. However, I admire your audacity. Or perhaps it is merely imbecility. We shall see," Jedediah responded. The sheriff ambled forward, his face ashen and etched with concern. He raised his hand. "Gentlemen," he declared, his voice quavering. "Are you prepared?" Jedediah and Blackwood both nodded. The sheriff inhaled deeply. "Then let the reckoning commence." He dropped his hand. The world seemed to decelerate. Jedediah drew his pistol, the action fluid and ingrained. He aimed at Blackwood, his muscles tensed. Justice prevails, a bruised dawn bled across the sky, shades of plum clashing with furious coral. A frigid gust knifed through the cottonwoods, carrying the reek of soaked earth and a premonition of violence. Jedediah braced himself, the familiar rasp of his gun belt a meager comfort against his skin. Across the gritty expanse of Main Street, Silas Blackwood's lip curled in a cruel smile, his pistol glinting wickedly in the pale light. Behind hastily shut windows and darkened doorways, the townsfolk huddled, their dread a tangible thing. Blackwood punctuated the silence with a brown stream of tobacco. "Juice. Final offer. Rancher. The woman and those ledgers. Maybe, just maybe, you'll greet another sunrise." Jedediah's jaw hardened, a muscle ticking. "That ledger is the evidence of your misdeeds, Blackwood. You'll answer for them this day." Though his aging frame trembled, his voice remained a steady baritone, defiance etched into every syllable. "No weakness. Not now. Misdeeds?" Blackwood's chuckle rasped like a file on bone. "I prefer to think of it as strategic acquisition, and you, Jedediah, are an impediment to progress." The wind intensified, whipping miniature cyclones of dust around their boots. The air thrummed with anticipation, heavy as lead. Jedediah tightened his grip on his revolver, the cold steel a source of grim fortitude. He pictured Clara, her face creased with worry, the phantom of her past clinging to her like grave clothes. He would shield her, no matter the cost. "Draw, Blackwood," Jedediah commanded, his voice ringing with unexpected force. Blackwood's eyes glittered with dark amusement. With a flourish, he spun his pistol, then leveled it. The gunshot ripped through the morning, a savage crack that echoed, magnified, through the slumbering town. Jedediah reacted on instinct, dropping into a fighting stance and squeezing the trigger. The slug screamed past Blackwood's ear, a near miss. Blackwood stumbled, momentarily unbalanced. Jedediah, despite his years, moved with a surprising liveness, honed from decades wrestling with the land. He darted and swayed, his gaze locked on his adversary. Another shot echoed, Blackwood's bullet kicking up dirt inches from Jedediah's boots. The pungent odor of gunpowder stung. The air. Suddenly, the relative quiet shattered. A runaway wagon, pulled by panicked horses, hurtled into the street, scattering the terrified onlookers. Clara stood tall in the back, her expression resolute, clutching a stack of documents. Martha Abernathy, usually meek, sat beside her, the reins clutched in a white-knuckled grip, her face set in a determined frown. "Stop this!" Clara's shouts sliced through the gunfire's din. "I have proof, evidence of Silas Blackwood's crimes." Blackwood's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "Clara, you'll regret this defiance." He swung his gun towards her, but Jedediah was swifter. His shot found its mark, shattering Blackwood's gun hand, sending the weapon spinning into the dust. Blackwood howled, clutching his mangled hand. Clara leaped from Crow. The wagon. Holding the papers aloft. "These are the ledgers, the authentic ledgers. They expose how Silas has been bleeding this town dry, rigging land deals, and corrupting officials." Her voice, clear and resolute, rang out as she began to read, detailing Blackwood's fraudulent schemes. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, their initial fear dissolving into simmering anger. Sheriff Collins forced his way to the front, his face a thundercloud. "Clara Whitmore, you're under arrest." Martha Abernathy stepped into his path, blocking him with surprising force. "Hold your horses, Sheriff. Let's hear what the lady has to say. Some of us are tired of seeing this town run by snakes." A chorus of agreement swelled, a tide of discontent rising. The townspeople, long cowed by Blackwood's power, discovered courage in Clara's bravery, galvanized by irrefutable evidence. The scales had fallen from their eyes. Blackwood's empire, built on deceit and intimidation, crumbled before them. Clara continued her recitation, her voice unwavering as she unraveled Blackwood's intricate web of corruption. The ledges revealed his control of water rights, his extortion of local businesses, and his potential link to the disappearances of several respected citizens. Sheriff Collins, his face mottled with fury, attempted to push past Martha, but the crowd stood their ground. They turned their backs on him, their allegiance shifting to Clara and Jedediah. "Enough!" Blackwood bellowed, his voice ragged with pain and fury. He lunged for Clara, but Jedediah intercepted him, landing a solid punch to his jaw. Blackwood collapsed, unconscious, into the dirt. The townspeople surged forward, surrounding Blackwood. They bound his wrists and ankles, their faces grim with purpose. "We'll handle this from here, Sheriff," one of the townsfolk said, his voice laced with steel. "We'll ensure justice is served." Sheriff Collins stood paralyzed, stripped of his authority, his face a complex study of conflicting emotions, anger, apprehension, and a dawning awareness that his own complicity was about to be exposed. Clara turned to Jedediah, her eyes brimming with gratitude and tenderness. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved me." Jedediah clasped her hand, his touch both gentle and strong. "We did it," he corrected. "Together." He surveyed the townspeople, their faces alight with renewed hope and unity. He felt an unprecedented connection to this community, a fierce determination to build a future here, with Clara by his side. The days that followed drifted into weeks. Silas Blackwood was transported to the state penitentiary, his reign of terror finally concluded. Sheriff Collins, implicated in Blackwood's schemes, was removed from his position and replaced by a more ethical and competent lawman. Clara was fully exonerated, her reputation restored, her past laid to rest. The ledges served as undeniable proof, and the town embarked on a gradual process of recovery, reclaiming what Blackwood had stolen. Clara, with her incisive mind and unwavering honesty, emerged as a respected figure, helping to untangle the remnants of Blackwood's schemes and ensuring that fairness prevailed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of apricot and rose, Jedediah and Clara stood on the porch of their ranch house, their hands entwined. The air carried the sweet perfume of wildflowers and the rhythmic chirping of crickets. "It's over," Clara murmured, her voice soft with relief, her eyes filled with serenity. "It's finally over." Jedediah squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's just the beginning," he countered, his voice resonant with affection and optimism. "Our beginning." He turned to her, framing her face with his hands, and kissed her deeply. A kiss that spoke volumes of devotion, absolution, and a future brimming with limitless possibilities. They had confronted their inner demons, transcended their pasts, and discovered solace in each other's embrace. Their bond, forged in the furnace of hardship, was unbreakable. As the first stars winked into existence in the deepening twilight, Jedediah and Clara stood side by side, silhouetted against the horizon, two souls united, poised to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Together, they had found love in the most desolate of places, and they were certain, beyond any doubt, that their love would endure. Their love was a testament to the transformative power of second chances, the indomitable spirit of humanity, and the enduring promise of a brighter future. They were home, at last.